Kriega, bundle up. A while back on the channel, one of the things that we did was we walked through Titan Comics issues number 0 and issue number 1 of Conan the Barbarian. And the reason why I did that was because I was really excited that somebody was producing new Conan content, that it was coming out from a totally different direction, and that they were doing something really legendary with the material that I was reading. And spoiler alert, for those of you who haven't watched those two videos, the bottom line is I was impressed. Okay, but I stopped short of actually talking through the content. I didn't want to ruin the surprise for everybody who hasn't read it yet. So, spoiler alert right now in this video. What we're going to do today is I'm going to walk through the entire complete story arc number 1. Those of you who don't know, it's actually done. They finished it in the first 4 issues. So we're going to walk through what happens in that story today. If you haven't read it and you don't want me to ruin it for you, you probably want to stop watching now. Now, the next thing we're going to do after we walk through it is I want to finish this one off just by saying, here's some key strengths that I saw in this. And I wanted to talk about what I'm sort of looking forward to from what I've heard so far about story arc number 2. There's no new news here, okay? What I'm getting is the same stuff on the internet that you guys are. But I'm going to come back at the very end of this thing and actually throw in my own Hyborian Age Conspiracy Theory, because I think they might be doing something here. Let's get into the books. Okay, so we're going to start off by talking about issue number 0. Now, most other people are probably not going to include issue number 0 as actually part of the storyline, but I'm going to include it here because, as you guys know who've watched my videos before, I'm all about context. Issue 0 came out, and it was a nice one because it really walked through Conan and the Battle of Venarium. One of the things that they really wanted to hammer down on that one was that Conan really was getting into this desire to see the world. The whole battle of the sack of Venarium, which was within Samaria, which we all know, is a pivotal story within Conan folklore. It happened just the same as it normally would. It didn't really focus on the battle so much as it focused on Conan's observations when the whole thing was over. It was beautifully written because within that, Conan spent a lot of time reflecting, saying, why does this victory feel so hollow? Why am I not really having a sense that I've achieved something here? What are these fantastic things that I'm finding? He's picking up jewelry and baubles and stuff, and he's like, well, what are these? And at the end of the day, the one that I think really drives him over the edge was he picked up a sword. It was an interesting one because the sword that he picks up is actually something that comes back in this story and becomes really important later on in issue number 4. But we'll get there. Let's just start with this one. He picks it up and it has strange carvings on it. And it really, I think, triggers him to say, there is more of this world that I need to see. I've heard the stories from my grandfather about the wide, wide world outside of Samaria, these wonderful jungles and grasslands and things that are hot and deserts. I've never lived them. And this sword really speaks to me and says, I should probably do this. So before dawn, he disappears. He's gone. And that's really where issue 0 ends off. It's really the start of his wandering, and it triggers him, and it talks to where this sword came from and what that wanderlust was. It's beautifully written. I really enjoyed that. And the other thing that I really enjoyed about issue 0 was the art. The art within it really was telling the story. The story and the verbiage over top of it was very little writing, just transmitted beautifully through both the visual image and the spoken word. Beautifully done issue, and it really triggered me to say, I'm going to keep buying this one, and I'm somewhat excited about it. That's what takes us now into issue number 1. All right, so let's get into issue number 1 here. Now, issue number 1 is really where the story takes off, and this is a nice one. I really enjoyed this, because now you've got Conan returning back to his roots. He's already headed out. You had that context given to us in issue number 0, and you know he was heading off in this beautiful wanderlust. One of the things we love about Conan, literally, is what he thinks is what he does. There's very little to stop him along the way, which is why he's such a go-getter. Honestly, if the guy was a corporate banker, he'd be all the way up there on the top of the ranks and making millions of dollars at this point. Plus, he'd probably slaughter most of the board of directors, too. That's probably not such a hot idea. Let's get back into the banker analogy here and go back to Conan. He's coming back home, and the story starts off with, of all things, a bar fight. Conan is in a large dispute, a talking dispute and a physical dispute, with the leader of the mercenary group that he's been working for. And basically, he's blaming his cowardice for the death of 2 of his peers. Things aren't going well for the leader of this mercenary group. As near as I can tell, Conan was probably just going to kill him, but calmer heads prevail. Basically, Conan's other peers step in, and they say, you know what, he's a jerk, he's a bit of an ass, but you know what, let's just let him live, shall we? And it will pay you out, and you can part ways, and off you go, and you can enjoy being your barbarian and continue heading on north back up to Samaria, which is where you were going. Kind of a really interesting aspect that calmer heads did prevail here. I didn't see it coming, and I'm kind of glad it did, because it really shows that Conan has aged. He's no longer the teen that's out there brooding and just killing everything. He's thinking. That's a positive thing. Anyways, the story then continues on with Conan talking to the bar owner, talking to one of his employees, and I think we all know where this is going. Conan is the Rico Suave of the Hyborian Age. You know there's gonna be some shtupping here, but interruption. Haha, didn't see that coming, did you? The skies have gone black. Everything is going wrong in the village. People are running into the bar saying, it's the middle of the day, but it's dark out there. What's going on? And Conan grabs his sword and stomps out there, doing his little respect walk as he stomps out. And they're talking, and they're saying, well, this is kind of odd. And as they're saying this, suddenly all the wildlife sounds end. Now, for those of you who have been out in the wildlife, suddenly when things end, it's a rather creepy feeling because it means something's coming. And lo and behold, something does come. Crashing out through the bush in front of them is a horse, an almost exhausted horse, and on it a Pictish warrior. Pictish warrior who turns out to be female. Enter Brissa. Brissa is a Pictish warrior who was the last of her tribe. We find out in this story that Brissa's entire tribe was descended upon by these cursed ones, the lost tribe, that slaughtered all of her people. All of her family are dead. She is all that is left. And now she rides ahead of the tribe, warning people of them, saying they're coming. For the love of God, run. Do not try to fight them. And when she tells this message, not all background, but this particular message to these people, the villagers of this particular area, their response is not positive. In fact, it's somewhat racist. It's like, I'm not going to listen to you, you Pictish blank. I'm just stopping there, okay? Because I think that rather was Hyborian Age racism. And even Conan is saying to himself, well, I'm not particularly a big fan of the Picts. Should I listen to this? And as he's contemplating this and discussion is happening, well, it's too late because the lost tribe is upon them. Out through the bush behind them comes the lost tribe, and they look upon them and they see effectively Pictish warriors, which are scary enough in and of themselves, but they're undead. And they descend like a wave crashing on a rock. They just boom, they hit the village and everybody's just getting slaughtered. It is going negatively. Why? Well, because they're Pictish warriors to begin with, which are pretty fearsome. But the whole stabby thing isn't quite working. Cut a head off, cut a limb off, all that sort of stuff. Yes, but you got to be pretty big juggernaut of a warrior to be pulling moves like that. So the village is just getting overrun. Brissa and Conan find themselves, fighting back to back at one point in time and recognizing the only way we're going to get out of this is to get out of this by working together. And they say, this is probably a lost cause. This village is overrun. Is there really anything we can do here? Probably not. And this is where the thinking man of Conan comes in and he says, we're probably better off just to retreat here. And they do. They throw a firebomb at basically the bar they were drinking out of because they said, well, we're not going to be able to hold up in that even though it is stone because they're just going to keep coming. And they head out into the sides. They leave the battle where he then dresses her wounds. Then they get the backstory that I mentioned earlier. And he says, well, my plan now is I'm going to head north. I'm going to head north into Samaria. And I suggest you come with me because, that's probably our safest route given the fact that this lost tribe, this horde, is here and they're so unstoppable. And the issue ends off with Brissa telling Conan, well, I hate to break this to you, bud, but they're already in Samaria. Ew. Okay, into issue number 2. Now, I tell you, this is kind of a fun one, and I like this because what happens in the story really is you're seeing a ramping up of the overall severity of what's happening here. We left last time with basically Brissa saying, hey, by the way, giant Sumerian hulking piece of man meat that you are, I got bad news. The horde's already in Samaria. That conversation really ends issue number 1, and things are going to start escalating here because generally Sumerians don't react well to invasion. That whole Venarium thing 8 years earlier kind of was an indicator of how well they react to that. So probably a bad idea. Probably bad things are happening. You know this in the back of your head. Take that little snippet, that vignette, that piece of information, keep it back there. Now let's get into issue number 2. Interesting aspect about this one is it doesn't actually start with them heading off. It starts with them doing a smart thing. They're learning more about their enemy. They actually stay at the village that was initially ruined and watch the last fighter being taken down. They're watching from a distance. As they're watching this, they're seeing what this horde is doing. What they observe is the horde isn't collecting loot. It's not collecting any sort of booty. It's not collecting, well, it is collecting a kind of booty. Not collecting anything of any sort that's of real material value. What it is doing, though, is it's collecting corpses. Yeah, that's kind of weird. And it binds them into this, basically, it's described and it's depicted in the comic, which is, it's pretty bang on. This ball of human flesh, this ball of bodies that's all bound together in a net that they then take and they start dragging north up into Samaria. This is by the way, me reenacting how they're walking with this thing. Because bear in mind, they're zombies, so I imagine they walk a little different, probably more like this. more of a lumbering thing. But I guess they're fairly fast zombies because they slaughtered a lot of people. So maybe not your classic zombie, maybe your new-bound zombie, the zombie that's a little bit more dangerous. Anyways, they're wandering north, and one of the things that Brissa and Conan notice as they follow them is that every couple hours they sort of stop and they do this. Now I know you're thinking the screen just sort of froze there. It didn't. What they're doing is they're stopping and they're staring up into the sky. And they do this every couple hours. And Conan and Brissa are watching this. They're wondering, it's kind of weird. What are they doing? But we're staying at a distance. We're continuing to watch. And then every once in a while, they just stop staring at the sky. And they'd adjust their course a little bit. And then they'd continue, oh, by the way, the net, okay. Staggering along with the net, doing their thing, and heading on north up into Samaria. So Conan and Brissa are following this, and they're observing this whole behavior. And it's taking days. They're spending days following these people. And one of the things that Conan is saying is he's starting to get to know a little bit more about Brissa. And he's talking to her, and they rebandage her wound, for example, and he's binding it. And then he's telling her, I come from here, and I was in Venarium, and I had my colleagues there who worked with me, and we sacked the city. And when I was there, that's when I found this sword. And it really encouraged me to go and see the world. This sword convinced me to see the world. And Brissa looks at the sword, and she's like, whoa. Why was that even? First of all, that's a Pictish artifact, number one. Number two, it's an ancient Pictish artifact, and I want it back. And Conan's like, oh, is it? Well, I'll tell you what, when the whole adventure is over, you can have it. And her response to that is, no, you'll give it to me right now, or I'll gut you. I'm paraphrasing, but that was effectively the message that was delivered. While they're bickering, one of the Lost, who was doing the whole standing around staring thing, has overheard this and has come over and has discovered them. And Brissa's looking over Conan's shoulders. Conan's facing away from the Lost guys behind him. And she's suddenly eyes wide open. She's thinking, this is going to be bad, because this thing could just yell and suddenly the entire horde will be upon them. There's only two of them and not really a lot of space to run. And Conan turns and slaughters it. Slice. And the thing drops dead, and Brissa thanks him. And then they talk a little bit more, and he says, it's not going to do us any good to do this whole bickering thing here. We should probably stop this. And we should probably work on getting along. And then they talk a little more, and that leads to the invariable. You knew it was coming in issue number 1, and he was interrupted in issue number 1, so we're into issue number 2 now. So what happens? The obligatory stooping. That's right, Conan and Brissa decide to get it on, while the horde is over here doing their... Time passes after the stooping, and they wander along, and they find that the horde is now, I'm calling it the horde, really it's actually the Lost Tribe, has wandered its way into Samaria, and they come upon a Sumerian village, which is in ruins. And Brissa turns to Conan and says, I am so sorry. And Conan's like, that's all right. You know what? They would have given their best in trying to fight this thing down. So, I don't think anybody died in vain here. They would have actually fought a good fight and died a good death. And they head into this group, and as they're heading into this group, and this village, and they're looking and they're saying, well, how do we really kill an army that doesn't really have a leader? These guys just sort of meander along. And as they're looking, they see once again the zombie guys are doing this. And there's bodies everywhere, right? The zombies are just staring off into space again. But this time, unlike the normal staring off into space like this, and then the shuffle and the obligatory change direction and then wander off that way, there's a massive bolt of light that comes out of the sky. The sky opens and light comes down. And at that time, everything is deafened with this booming war cry sound that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere all at the same time. And Conan and Brissa drop to the ground, grabbing their ears. They're suffering from this particular thing, which tells you this is really a booming noise. This isn't something small. As they hit the ground and they're wondering, oh my God, they start to have visions. And the visions are basically of people shedding their skin like reptile skin, and there's suddenly humanity being led to a precipice and being sacrificed to an ancient god, a god beyond time. Not actually, it doesn't reference the name God. An ancient being, a being beyond time, a being beyond death. And the depiction at the bottom is a skull with its mouth wide open as bodies are falling into it. And you're like, that's not good. That's probably a bad thing. And when Conan and Brissa arise, suddenly all the dead Sumerians around them stand and attack. Because they've just been brought back to life by this war cry, this booming sound in the air. And Conan finds himself thinking, well, I guess the time for subtlety is over. I guess we gotta fight now. So they do, and they fight the Sumerians. And it's amazing, because up to this point in time, Conan has really referenced the fact that the Sumerians are the hardiest fighters ever. And he's now right in the middle of a village full of Sumerian zombies that are attacking him. This is not going to be a good thing. And it's only by working together with Brissa that they actually do survive. And the unfortunate thing is now, Conan is being forced to re-kill his friends. one of the things that happened when he was talking about Venarium was he referenced 3 friends specifically by name. And I'm not going to say the names here because it's a moot point. One of the first bodies, so zombies, animated bodies that they had to kill, was one of them. I think it was Patrak, I think was his name. Stabbed him, ran him right through. And he actually apologized to him. He was like, I'm sorry, Patrak, I'm going to stab. And that was the end of it. And then the second one of his friends, who was known as the oak, the tree, comes at him and he's like, oh, this is going to be bad. And he defends himself from the axe that's coming down by holding up the sword like that. And Brissa comes up and chops his head off from behind. And thank goodness Brissa was there to do that, because otherwise, well, bad things would have happened. The bottom line is the battle continues, and as the battle continues and they are fighting their way out of it and they fought these last major Sumerians, I guess they find themselves kind of on the edge of the battle, because what's happened is, I guess after the sound happened, the horde itself has meandered off, probably with the net over its head. They've meandered off and they've left. Conan and Brissa find themselves on the battlefield, but they find themselves alone, but they suddenly look up and they see it, the Eldritch god type magic culmination that was the end of this long journey up into Samaria, which is a giant stone citadel, a giant black rock creeping out of the earth with green smoke coming out of it. And that's where we end issue number 2. All right, let's get into issue number 3 here. Now, I gotta tell you, this was a fun one for me, because what this one did was it really took the whole story and it jumped it up a level. Because what we were seeing here was the whole beast mode version of Conan, really going above and beyond what he was before. Somebody actually made a comment on one of my previous videos where they said, hey, you know what, I think the toughest version of Conan, really the most beast mode version of him, was right after he came back from beyond the Black River. And you know what, I 100% concur with that. All of Robert E. Howard's writings that I've gotten through so far really show that to be the beast mode version of Conan that I see as being the most severe. This particular issue says beast mode to me. This is Conan hitting the upper bound of what I think he can actually do as a human being. And really, the story ends off almost inferring that. We left off the last story with Conan and Brissa sort of staring up at the black citadel, the green smoke coming out, and they obviously are not backing down. They say, let's head on in here and see what we're going to see. And as they head in, they're being sneaky, and they're noticing within this that parts of this look like it was just molten stone, jutted out rocks. But then there are other parts that look somewhat more manufactured, somewhat more ancient, somewhat more built out. Doors, for example, hallways, stonework, masonry. And they're heading through this and they see priests, or whatever you're assuming are priests here, because suddenly you're no longer seeing the shambling zombie Pictish, like now Sumerian warriors. No, what you're seeing now are guys in robes. Guys in robes able to actually utilize keys to open doors and things. And they follow these guys. And these guys lead them into an open doorway where they go, huh. And they see people shuffling about. And they realize that what it's actually seeing here are Sumerians that have been taken alive. So, a little different for the Lost Tribe here. You're no longer slaughtering everything and dragging back of a big ball of bodies. No. What you're doing now is you're actually taking people alive. And Conan heads in and talks to the Sumerians in Sumerian and sort of challenges them. And within that group, he finds that one of his actual former comrades, one of the 3 that he named in the last issue that he took Venarium with, is there. They recognize Conan. And they recognize, oh, you're here. And they tell the story of how they've been basically starved. And when they're at their weakest, the pale ones come in and take them. And they don't come back. And Conan's in the middle saying, what's a pale one? What are you talking about? And the Sumerian prisoners are saying, no. These guys with the ropes, yeah, they take us away for whatever their nefarious purpose is. And nobody comes back. Doesn't matter if they're woman, child, elderly, doesn't matter. This is what they're doing. And Conan's like, well, this is making me fairly angry. And just as he's having this conversation, he's somewhat engrossed in this. Well, Brissa isn't really that engrossed with it. And Brissa's paying more attention and suddenly notices the noise behind them. And what happens is 2 of these robed figures and 2 of the Pictish zombie dudes from the Lost Tribe have now come up behind them. Well, this isn't going to go well. Suddenly a battle is going to ensue here, and it does. Conan and Brissa openly engage in the battle, and they're stabbing away and cutting and slicing, because there's 2 of them against 4 here. And what Conan discovers is that these robed figures are horrible to look at. They're missing skin. It's like, just like the Vision, where the skin of humanity has been peeled away like reptile skin. And he's like, oh, this is bad. This is really bad. We don't just have zombies here, we've got these guys. And as he's noticing this, he's getting angrier and angrier as he's involved in this fight. But what's happened is the 4 guys who are fighting them have kind of forgotten that you have a whole bunch of really angry, tough Sumerians sitting on the other side of this cage, and they fall against him. The last individual is actually taken down by the guys behind the cage because they grab him and pull his head through, and, well, you can read the comic. I'm not going to tell you exactly what happens there. Once they're actually free, though, Conan stops and says, okay, Brissa, I got a job for you. Brissa's like, anything for you. What do you need? We are going to do it. And he's like, you're going to take the infirm, the women, the children, and that's, I believe, how he broke it down. And you're going to get him the fridge out of here. You're going to walk him out. And she's like, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to head down here and I'm going to actually end this cult. And then she says, or die in the process. And he's like, well, yeah, that could happen too. But you know what? I'm taking three of the best Sumerian warriors I can get my hands on out of this group of starving Sumerians, and we're going to go in there. We're gonna be just fine. Don't you worry. I'll come back and find you. You just take these guys out of here to safety. And Brist's like, well, okay. And Conan does say, by the way, you've done everything that we agreed that you were going to do. Why don't you take this Pictish sword now? Take this and recognize that you've done everything that you were honor bound to do. And Briss is like, no. You're going to need that more than I am. You go ahead and keep that. Very important point on that one. Anyways, Brissa heads on out. She does encounter some trouble on the way up, but not really much. I mean, she ends up stabbing one guy, I guess, near the doorway, and they head on out. And we're going to leave that story and that storyline there for a second. Conan and his three compatriots have wandered on down. They've managed to slaughter more of these priests to get robes. So all four of them are covered now, and they head on down into this pit, following where there's a noise, and they find tons of people standing around with these robes on. Assuming everybody underneath the robe looks the exact same as the two that they've killed earlier, these half-zombified, just horror-bound pictures that very much look reptilian in the way they're drawn, and there's some sort of ceremony going on. The ceremony seems to be they're chanting in a language nobody understands. But then there's a name. Thulsa Doom. Boom! Thulsa Doom, right there, named, and then and two people say Doom, and they throw this Sumerian that was sitting in the middle of it into this pool that's in the middle. That's pretty horrifying. Thulsa Doom. Yeah, that just upped the level of severity. And you think back and you think, well, actually, that would kind of match that vision he had with that skull with the open mouth before and humanity being sacrificed into it. Because Thulsa Doom is a dude that's oftentimes depicted with a skull for a head. That could be it. Or is it something worse? Or maybe these guys are totally out of their league and they don't even know what Thulsa Doom is. Anyways, we'll cut back to Brissa. Brissa at this point in time has managed to get everybody away. And she's saying, well, you guys head on out here. I got to make a choice. Do I go back and try to help Conan here, or do I follow you guys? Because really, you're at safety now. Do I need to do any more for you? And really, what am I honor bound to do here? Do I really need to help Conan? Sure, we were stooping, but I mean, do I consider myself? And then a choice is made. That's basically where you leave that vignette. At this point in time, Conan is down there watching this whole mess. And what happens is, unfortunately, he and his colleagues are discovered. They're discovered in such a way that suddenly everybody's on them. They're getting attacked like crazy. And you know what? The Sumerians are doing everything they can to fight it off. But you got to understand, you're horrendously outnumbered here. And you've got this pond in the middle of this area that you can see souls floating around in. And you have this high priest over here. But you're basically being driven towards it by this horde. You know falling in that water is bad. This is bad, okay? You've seen people dropped in it and they don't come back. That's going to be a bad scenario. You don't want to go in there. But unfortunately, this is a war of attrition. These guys are continuing to come along. Your three dudes are getting worn down. You're now two extra dudes, one extra dude. And Conan makes the leap. He dives across the water. This giant leaping run. Gets over to the priest. The priest is somewhat upset. And Conan stabs him. Say goodbye, head priest. We've had enough of your crap. And unfortunately, the momentum takes both of them into the water. End of issue number 3. Okay, let's get into the last issue of this story. This is issue number 4, and I gotta tell you, this was a fun one for me because, quite frankly put, it took all the level of severity and just kept bringing it up. What we've seen so far in the story, really through just masterful writing and honestly beautiful visual depiction, is an increase in the level of severity of everything facing Conan as this has gone along. Now, a lot of people would not consider issue 0 as part of the story, but I do, because that's where this whole sword thing came from. And we've seen this sword thing now come up as a specific mentioning point twice in a 4-issue series that's covering a lot of material. So we know it's somewhat important. So we've seen Conan start with the sack of Venarium. Well, that's a fairly serious thing to begin with. And then you've seen him just continue to move along. You've got this deathless zombie horde. Well, that sounds pretty serious too. And then you've got the deathless zombie horde in their own hideout. Okay, that's also pretty serious because it's now backed up with, a zombie horde that's also Sumerian zombies. And then, worst of all, somebody just said the name Thulsa Doom. Now, Conan has been out there meandering for 8 years. You cannot tell me that in no point in time he has heard the name Thulsa Doom. I guarantee you he has heard the name Thulsa Doom. It is absolutely horrifying because this is the big sorcerer, the major mage to the pre-cataclysmic era. The only thing that kept Thulsa Doom in line was King Kull himself, which at this point in time has near mythical godlike status to the Hyborian Age. He's just a spoken of legend. That is just it. So you gotta step back and say, okay, Conan, hearing that name, would probably recognize that things are getting a little serious here. And in fact, if he's really smart, he'd be crapping his pants. But honestly, he can't because he's drowning right now. He's a little busy. As you know, issue 3 ended with Conan going down into the murky water, while issue 4 opens with this continuing. The priest, which we're going to assume is dying at this point in time, because he literally did just get... He's now being grabbed by black tentacles that are dragging him down. And Conan looks at this and says, these black tentacles clearly are going for anything that has the last vestiges of life in it, which is why the Sumerians are being sacrificed, are being thrown in alive. Grabs the priest, drags it down. Now it goes for Conan. 100% alive Conan, not stabbed Conan. This guy is literally alive. Obviously a major morsel that can be pulled down by something that craves life. It reaches up and grabs Conan. And Conan is thinking, I can fight this. I can fight this. I can do this. But he knows as soon as it holds him, no man on earth could possibly fight the strength of what's in front of me. And he resigns himself at this point in time. Well, I fought well. This is a good death. I'm pretty happy with how this is going to end. And this is where things change. Things now become even more serious. Because as he's floating down in the blackness, and you would expect the blackness to take him, what he finds himself is floating, stops. Instead of blackness, floating, lightness. And suddenly he finds himself in a place where he's talking to none other than Brule. Brule the Spear Slayer, Brule of the Borni tribe, standing right in front of him saying, well, you're not ready to die yet. And Brule then tells him the story. And Conan would obviously recognize Brule. He would recognize this name. And quite frankly put, he's probably asking himself at this point in time, okay, I'm dead and this is horrifying. And this is some sort of heroic person that's supposed to lead me into the afterlife. Even though I'm a believer in Crom, that kind of doesn't really make sense. Or he's thinking, holy crap, literally the Brule is in front of me and I should probably be a little bit more respectful of, what I'm saying. But then again, I'm Conan and what do I care? Anywho, Brule then tells him the story and he says, well, listen, that sword that you have right there, that sword's pretty important because that used to be on the tip of my spear and it was blessed to fight both the living and the dead. Let me tell you where this was last used. And he tells him a tale of Brule back in the day, pre-cataclysm, just driving and riding up to a group of basically Pictish tribe as the sky goes dark and they invite him to a feast and he gets to the feast, but there's no food. And he's like, hey, where's the food? What's going on? He's like, oh, no, the food, you should know the nourishment is coming. Follow us. And they follow the tribe's people out. This is just Brule with just a couple of his own men, follows them out and they lead them out into a field where there used to be crops that have now just gone fallow and nothing is growing. And Brule is thinking, none of this makes sense. What are you people doing? And he sees it. He sees this grotesque, statuesque thing carved out of a black rock sticking out of the ground. And he sees its eye, and an eye looks at him, and it's horrifying, and it seems to stare right through him, and it stares right through him, and it stares through his own people that just rode in with, his own elite unit. While all this is happening, the tribe's people that he's just met are going BS nuts, and they're getting ready to attack. And Brule is watching us as it stares through him and hears a war cry, and suddenly he turns and he's aware of what's going on and he fights, and as he screams, all of the people around him, his own people, wake up and a battle ensues and everybody dies. Everybody's going down in this one. And Brule looks at this stone and he knows this is the problem, and he takes that spear and he hurls it with all of his strength, and it goes and it hits the rock, and it hits the rock just at the same time as a bolt of lightning comes down and strikes the rock. Boom, it's dead, and everybody's dead. All the people who have been cursed drop dead. And all of Brule's own people, well, most of them, are all dead. And that's really the story. And he explains, this thing is made, this sword is made to fight the living and the dead. And that black rock that I killed is the exact same thing that's causing your problem right now. So you get out there and you pick up that rock and you do this. And Conan's like, I am on that, 100%. 100% support this. I don't care if I die in the process, let's do this. And Brule drops a bomb. He turns around and he says, well, Kull would be very happy that there is still heroic lines within the lines of kings. And Conan's like, whoa, what did you just say? And Brule's like, no, enough talking to you. Boom, back into your own time. Literally, Doctor Strange invisible hand pumps him back into his own time. And Conan wakes up and he recognizes that he's still drowning and he's in tentacles. And he grasps that sword with an extra strength and he slices his way out of the tentacles. And he looks over and he sees the source of the tentacles and he looks within it and there's a skull with glowing eyes. Well, this is pretty Thulsa Doom-like. And he heads over there thinking, well, I don't have enough air to get back up to the surface, so I'm probably going to die. But once again, I was just resigned to die a couple of seconds ago. This is a good way to go. I'm perfectly cool with this. And he takes the sword and he stabs it into the skull. And just as he does that, lightning comes down. Now, this is a weird part. I'm assuming the lightning somehow got its way through the entire stone tower. Maybe through an open door, window, I don't know. Comes down, hits the water, goes through the water, hits the skull, just as the sword hits it. Kaboom! Conan is blown back to the surface. And he's there with his friend, the one survivor. That was also the survivor, by the way, of his sack of Venarium. Guy who knows Conan. And he's like, dude, I know you just went through hell in the water, but there's still a lot of zombies here. We should probably fight our way out. And they do. They fight their way out of the castle. They head their wrong word, castle, out of the giant stone monstrosity, make their way on out. And as they wander out, they run into, because the whole thing is collapsing behind them, they run into the Cimmerian survivors who are there. And Conan says, well, you know, we did everything. That was a lot of fun. Good time was had by all. Everybody high fives all around. Everybody gets a high five. And then he says, hey, by the way, where's Brissa? I got to give her this sword. You know, she did the thing. And then they drop the bomb. Oh, Brissa went back in looking for you. And Conan, brooding, turns and looks. One last look. And then cut scene. For us and for the story, it has ended. Conan has finished the actual job. Unfortunately, it looks like Brissa has not survived. He's probably working on forgetting most of the stuff that Brule said to him, just because of the dialogue that was given to us in the writing, this dreamlike thing. Once it doesn't have context anymore, it's wearing away. So he's probably not remembering everything that was told to him, at least not absolutely. And the story cuts. Months later, we have a cut scene where some Asgard nomads are heading through, and they find the scene, and it's basically green. It looks beautiful again because, well, that's all the bad is over. And as they wander through, they find weapons, and they're picking up the weapons, thinking, well, we can always, make use of these. And, oh, look, cloth, we can make use of that. And one of the guys picks up a little piece of black stone. You immediately see him become infected with the same thing that caused the Lost Tribe in the first place. And that's the end of the story. It leaves you with a little bit of a cliffhanger to let you know, yeah, this is probably coming back. But it's left you through this beautiful swords and sorcery-like adventure that basically turned into a dungeon crawl with a battle with well, I'm not going to call him an elder god because he's not an elder god, but Thulsa Doom. Brule, the Spear Slayer, has come out, and all of this is culminated to the point where Conan can now walk away and head back into Cimmeria. Wonderful story. Let's get together and think about some of the cool things that came out of this and what we really enjoyed. All right, let's get back to this one and let's talk about what we really liked in this and what were some of the key takeaways in this one. Now, I've already mentioned this earlier, and I mentioned this when I did my review of issue number 0 and issue number 1, and I think the key takeaway in this that really makes this story arc successful is the marriage of the art style and the writing. Both of them are really well done in their own right, and I'm going to talk to that in a second, but it's the fact that these two things together work so well that carry this so well. Let's talk about the writing first. So you got Jim Zub, who is a writer who clearly knows Conan. He knows Conan really, really well, and he knows the world that Conan lives in. But on top of that, he's a fan. He actually understands what we as the fans want from Conan as well. So he knows how to write to that and give us a story that's going to really hook us and draw us in. And that is a key strength. I got to tell you, when you know your character, it makes it so much easier to write what you're writing. The art. Let's talk about Roberto de la Torre here. Roberto de la Torre. Sorry. I got to make sure I get that right because I'm going to slip on that one because it doesn't matter why I'm going to slip on it. Roberto de la Torre. This guy's work is so classic Conan, it hurts. And honestly, when you read this, and when I read the first couple of issues, especially issue number 0, I remember when I turned that page, I got a full body shiver. It was like I was reading Buscema from scratch, brand new, and I was like, whoa! Like, it was something that really spoke to me as a Savage Sword of Conan fan. And I know it speaks to the rest of you as Savage Sword of Conan fans as well, because I know people are really positive about this series so far. And art seems to be one of the points that people are mentioning. It's interesting, though, because it's not just Buscema. This is Roberto de la Torre's style that I've seen so far. It's interesting, because what I did was I took one of these books, I took actually issue 0, and I put it up directly against a Savage Sword of Conan Buscema art. There's a difference. When you read it on its own, when you take an issue 0 and you go through it, like, wow, and as I say, full body shudder, like, whoa, it's like listening to Nirvana's You Know You're Right 30 years later going, ah, it just catches you off guard, right? And you read that and you're like, wow. But then when you actually take it and put it beside something Buscema, you say, yeah, I can see the Buscema here. There's a lot of it here. But on top of that, there's very much his own art style in this as well. This is not some sort of cloned style. This is a learned style that's different and beautiful. And I'm glad it's actually taken what I'm going to call an art style and actually moved it up a bit. And there's a lot of Buscema fans out there. They're going to say, whoa, 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 Tennessee fans, you're talking about something sacrosanct here. And I know, this is going to be a painful one, but what I want you to do is actually take the old Buscema Savage Sword, black and white, and then put this beside it. And tell me you don't see a difference. And tell me you don't see something that you could even argue might actually be a slight improvement, at least for the comic format that it's in now. Buscema was the master of black and white Savage Sword of Conan, 100%, and I have seen nothing to explain that anything otherwise is in place. But as far as a colored work in a small format comic, more correctly, I think Roberto de la Torre has nailed this. This is beautifully done. So now let's talk about the two things together. These two work well together. It's interesting because I read an interview with Jim Zub earlier where he was talking about how he was working with Roberto de la Torre when they were doing issue number 0 and how pleased they were with the outcome of it because the two of them were working together. They were collaborating on this. This wasn't very much an issue of dictation. It was an issue of collaboration. And that collaboration led to what was a masterful issue number 0 and masterful storytelling all the way from issues number 1 through 4. There's nothing to complain about here. This is, in my mind, what I would picture to be a prototypical, perfect Conan story that has been launched as the first 4 issues of a new run. I am very happy with this one, and honestly, I think if you're going to read these, what I want you to do is take a look at the art, take a look at the writing, and then every once in a while, look at them and see how the two intermarry. It's this beautiful thing that you can clearly tell was not done in absence of one another. These two were working together. Well, everybody, that's the end of this one, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I tell you, this was a fun one for me because it gave me a chance to do a complete recount of the entire first story arc. And I really enjoyed this first story arc when I read it. I had a really hard time actually stopping myself from reviewing this and giving too much information about these stories out when they were coming out. And really, this was one of those things that made me feel like a kid again, where I was picking up new issues and I was reading them. And as soon as I was done, I was like, okay, 4 more weeks. We can make this. We can do this. 4 more weeks, we'll get the next issue, and then everything will be fine. This was a fun one, because I can tell you, I've been reading a fair number of newer comics lately, because I'm trying to actually work on this. And it's interesting to me that this is a character that I actually identify with a lot, that I particularly feel that I have some sort of emotional relationship with, which is strange, because I didn't know Robert E. Howard, and I've never met a Conan in my life. But either way, I feel like it's there. But the story is there, and it's continuing in such a way that it's making me go, wow, what is going to happen next? I really enjoyed reviewing this one, and I enjoyed really recounting the story for you guys because it gave me a chance to relive the whole story as I was doing it. And again, what's the big takeaway on this one? Really, it's that perfect marriage of art and writing. Now, I know in the next series, what you're seeing is Doug Braithwaite is going to be doing the art on this one for the next story arc. And for those of you who are wondering, yeah, this one, issue number 3, this was an example of his art right here, which is... yeah, this is a Doug Braithwaite cover. It's interesting that this is what we're going to see next. And I'm looking forward to seeing how this marries to the actual writing as well. Because, again, it's that marriage of the writing and the actual art that I think makes this story and this series work so well. Looking forward to this one continuing. Everybody, have yourself a great day. We'll see you in the next video. Okay, now this wouldn't be a Tennessee Facts review without some form of stupidity and lunacy and some sort of conspiracy theory type stupidity that I'm going to throw at you. I'm not going to get out the hat of lunacy on this one because I think this one is actually fairly well founded. Here's where I'm at on this one. Issue number 4 ended sort of on a down note. Briss is dead. She's gone. Well, let's just, okay, now, hold on. I know a lot of you are saying, well, on Tennessee Facts, the love interest for Conan dies all the time. Granted, I'm going to give you that. Here's where I'm at. She ain't dead. That's right. I do not believe she is dead. One of the things that I mentioned in my review of the things that worked really, really well in this was the fact that you had this marriage of art and writing. At no point in time in this do you have any depiction of the death of Briss. Did any of you see it? I didn't see it. There's reference to it, but no depiction of it. The depiction is her as a silhouette, looking back in the direction she came from as the rest of the Sumerians were heading this way. A decision was made. Yeah, a decision was made. A decision was made that she was going to go help Conan. At least that's what we've assumed. I don't believe she's actually dead. Now, there's a reason for this, and this is where I'm going to start getting a little bit out there, and you're going to say, "Well, Tennessee Facts, pump the brakes. You're jumping too far in this." No. Just hear me out on this one, okay? You know that Brissa is of one particular Pict tribe. Now, I have been Googling all over the place here, trying to find some sort of, I would love to see a genealogical tree of Pictish tribes and how they have changed and named and renamed from the pre-cataclysmic age up to the Hyborian age, because that would really help me here. But I haven't been able to find it. Here's where I'm at, though. Don't you think it's somewhat interesting that the person who came to visit Conan when he was basically on death's door wasn't Kull? It was Brule the Spear Slayer. If Conan's a direct descendant of Kull, which, by the way, is not actually a Robert E. Howard statement, that is something that was written after the fact in a Conan story by a different author, but if Conan is a direct descendant of Kull, and I would love to know how that happened because I have never heard of Kull having any children directly. If he was, wouldn't Kull have come to see him? Granted, Brule was there telling the story of, this is what I ran into when, and that was absolutely of added value, but why was it Kull was not the one there talking to him? Kull could just as easily have said, hey, here we've got this crazy sword that Brule used this one time when he ran into this, and Kull could have just as easily have told the story, but it wasn't. It was Brule. Briss at the beginning of the story, so angry that Conan had that sword. That is a Pict artifact. That is an ancient Pict artifact, and you'll give it to me or I'll gut you. And her entire tribe is gone. There's nothing left but her, because they were all killed down to the last one by the Lost Tribe. The Lost Tribe, who maybe we're supposed to be inferring here, might actually be what's left of the one that Brule killed the first time? I don't know. That one might be stretching it, but I'm willing to bet that Brule was there because Brissa was there. So let's take an extra step here, an extra leap. Would it not make sense that Brule, a Pict of the Borni tribe, which might have delineated down to any other tribe that we know of in the Hyborian Age, just the same way that Kull is an ancestor of Conan, could it be that Brule is an ancestor of Brissa? That's stretching it. Now, I don't have any evidence to say that, but if I was sort of sitting here saying to myself, how am I going to write this? So this would be really interesting. And, and the fact that, Conan and Brissa were stooping, are they going to make some sort of Pictish Sumerian sort of, I'm not going to go down the road of maybe they're having a kid yet, but, could it be that the reason Brule was there was because he's a direct ancestor of Brissa? Could it be the reason why Brissa was so fixated on this particular sword is as a direct ancestor of Brule, she knows of this sword for very good reason, and as such, takes it very seriously to the point of, no, I'm going to gut you. Oh, you're going off to fight the undead, potentially? Oh, you're going to need that. Does every Pict know that? I am saying that's a bit of a stretch. Yeah, I'm not quite buying that. So that's my conspiracy. Now, again, 4 issues down the road, or 12 issues down the road, or however many issues down the road, I can be proven entirely wrong about this particular theory. But I am convinced, though, that Brissa is not dead. I am convinced that we are going to see her again in this series. You mark my words.